Okay, today we see an example of this kind of navigation drawer. This is maybe the one of the last exercise on the UI side, so where you can give various navigations. We have already seen various layouts and master detail flow, and the final one is the navigation drawer. So of course, you can use this along with fragment or different activity, which also helps you to keep the space, uh, effectively occupied, and you can keep this navigation drawer to give further navigations to your uh, application. So you can hide it better, and it become a common for all fragments together, maybe. So you may have seen this thing maybe in your Gmail app, or most of the apps comes with this kind of pattern. But of course, your application makes a requirement of having such navigation. So it depends on your application. I cannot say like you should have a navigation for every application. So if required, you can have this kind of navigations. And of course, our how the UI flow is there, that makes the decision on what kind of UI you can keep it. For example, if your application have a various activity stacks which it require, you may not have this kind of thing, because one activity will take the user to another and keep going inside. Or if your application has various fragments which needs to be added according in the same host activity, you can use this kind of UIs. So let's see how we can have this integrated in our application. And also I've created one virtual machine which is based off 4.4.2, which is the same version what you're running. If you notice, my emulator contains an application called Maps. If you check your emulator, you may not see that. This map application won't be there in your emulator. So this kind of additional applications usually been given as a Google API. So you may have seen when I create a new project, various choices comes, especially on compile with. If you see, there is a option for Google API. I don't know whether you have such a drop down, but additional Google API will also be listed with the same version whatever you have as a base. So if you select them while you create your AVD, for example, when you create AVD process, this window, so some name, device, whatever. The target, if you select anything with the Google API extension, will give you an additional apps with the maps and other thing, because map is actually is not part of Android open source project. Map is a separate one, it's a proprietary one. Google still keep it as a closed source, so these things have been given as additionals. If you want to have a map based application running, I would recommend you to keep this. But anyway, the latest map version v2 and v3 I remember, which does not require this permission. But using Google APIs, you can make use of various Google proprietary technologies which is being given outside of open source project. So such a one I have selected to create my AVD. So this AVD, I have selected Google API level 19, which I had downloaded separately. And I prefer to use a Intel specific system image, because the emulator will slightly run faster, because my system is based off an Intel. Of course, your computer also should be based off an Intel process. In order to have that particular part working, you need to install additional drivers from Intel. Intel gives you a additional driver for having Atom processor callbacks on it, may improve your performance, but unfortunately you cannot download third-party drivers. So that's the reason I did not ask you to select it. So assume if I show you that, what is that additional thing? If you notice, while I also download system images Intel specific to Intel, but what you may have downloaded is ARM based system images. It means the emulator which is created runs on a different clock cycle than your processor, your computer processor. So it has to be converted according to the emulator cycle. So that eventually gives you a slow or lagginess on your emulator. If you download the same on the Intel, if your host processor is also a Intel, you can download some additional drivers called Intel Emulator Accelerator HAXM installer. You can just Google it, search it, it will direct you to the Intel website. There you can download that particular driver. After that, you can install Intel based images. So that image typically will run slightly faster because it runs parallelly. There is no conversion happens between the emulator and your host computer. So that's the reason this part slightly runs faster. But these are all additional stuff which is not mandatory, but if you are dependable on the emulator instead of a test device, I would advise you to go ahead and do that. Of course, in your live where you work on a project, make sure the company policy does not spoil your development. You have to give a number of exception lists before Android or anything specific to mobility application development. A standard, IT policy may not work because you may need a lot of licensing, you may need a lot of network protocols to be open for testing. Otherwise, you can get a test device, ask them to be connected with the independent network instead of Wi-Fi, whatever your company offers. Then you won't have such restrictions. But anyway, for downloading, updating these kind of SDKs, you would require a lot of internet, unrestricted internet. If anything restriction happens, of course, see, remember I started with this development 1.5. As I progress, I kept downloading the various versions. That's the reason in my computer you see a lot of things downloaded. Over the period I downloaded, and right now I'm in 5.0. So since my system does not have any restriction, I can parallelly download anytime, anything I can update. Make sure if you get deployed, because the Android development is very new to CTS. I'm not sure how the existing or deployed team is managing this scenario, but my recommendation would be, if any IT policy prevents you, you'll be having a hard time because we do not know the emulator, whichever ports are internally accessing in order to get the internet. We try to set the proxy with a specific documentation given by Android, but still it does not work. So that goes out of control. So we do not know. But for a better practice, I would recommend unrestricted internet plus ability to update your emulator as well as Android SDK. It's very important as far as Android application development concerned. So I thought of saying this as a note, but anyway, I'm just reminding you, on the deployment stage, you have to stress these requirements very clearly. Otherwise, you will have to wait for an endless approval process, and then on the development of your projects, you may end up in a various time. End up time wasting. Okay, that's a different case. So let us see how to create a navigation drawer. Let me close all the previous applications. Navigation drawer also has undergone various changes. Morning I was testing and I found one of API level was deprecated quite recently. So I had a tough time to fix it. Anyway, found a solution. Also, I'd like to remember Android 5.0 or even before 4.4, some versions start supporting 64-bit of operating system. So now devices, the phones also support 64-bit processor. Of course, Apple already supporting from their machines like iOS, Apple iPhone 5s. I remember from that onward they are supporting 64-bit. So now Android also supports 64-bit processors. So we are expecting a huge speed and various changes happening accordingly. That's the reason a lot of deprecations comes in between 4.4 to 5, because they are migrating into a different hardware specification. But that's not quite serious yet. So Let us start. Okay, let me go ahead with whatever default is there. Since it's mine is higher, or I'll go back to this for your comfortability. It's always recommended to use the whatever highest version available for your application development so that you will get access to a latest APIs. Anyway, Android is adding a backward compatibility, so if any latest thing introduced, things may be there to support the version callbacks or maybe the fallback, whatever old versions, that will also be supported. And this is, if you notice, the KitKat Wear or something else, if you notice, so after the update you may see it. This is for watch, like Android also now supports the gadgets of so wearing devices such as watch. So if you are developing for that kind of application, so you may have to select this kind of thing. It's pretty simple. Of course, it does not cover our application development training program, but anyway, with very small navigations are going to be supported. So the only part where it is going to be how to synchronize with the phone and the device. I mean, the particular wear. So we are not covering that now. Let me go back. Custom launcher. Okay. Something. Okay. Next. As usual, you always have a Hello World project is already created for you. The benefit of using the Hello World project is it has a various image resources. You don't need to manually create various images. So if you notice, there's a kind of a menu that the three bars, which is already there. Of course, it will be available as an image resource in the Hello World project. But anyway, we are going to create from the scratch. So we'll select the blank activity. Go with the same name. This is a really annoying thing, like always errors, because my app oh, I closed it. That's another problem. So version 21 themes, something is not okay. I'll also tell you how to get rid of this app compact or some package if you're really not using anything backward compatible stuff, because your application already contains a support package which is given for v4. This is v7 and above, so it's already contained a support package, which is something a later support got added.